Hello, I'm Joanne Turner. We're reporting from Carriers World in London this week for Total Telecom, and I'm talking to Carl Peaver from the TM Forum. Carl, welcome. You've taken part in a roundtable this morning here on 5G. So perhaps you can start a little bit by telling us, what is 5G?
You bet. So 5G could mean different things to different people, but if we start with the promise of it, it's really about connecting new services into our telecom environment. So if you think about it as the long tail of services such as augmented reality, having communication on trains, being able to drive autonomous cars, being able to do tactile internet, a number of these things that are really hard to do with the current technology we have because we don't have that latency, the throughput that we need, is made possible via 5G.
Okay, and how do we know, how do we put this in place?
So it needs to be an evolution driven by use cases. So we think it's important not to just build something and then hope that things will be sort itself out afterwards. What we need to do is have very clear use cases in place so that we can actually drive the future that we want. And in order to be able to do this, there's been lots of work in actually creating use cases that are sound and actually make a lot of sense. And then they in turn drive requirements. So requirements on low latency, for instance, down to 1 millisecond. Requirements on high throughput, up to 10 gigabit per second for me as a customer, down to things like how many connections you have per square kilometer. And in many of these cases, we are talking about 30 to 100 times more power than we have today. However, that's not enough, right? So having this in place, it's not a good idea to provide a service that fits everybody because this spectrum is really varied. So on one end, you will have services that really require ultra low latency, extremely high bandwidth on one end, and on the other, you will have the industrial internet, which could be a sensor in a lamppost that might require very, very low latency. High latency, but you just need it once in a while. Battery life is much more important in that scenario. So what we need is be able to slice the network in different ways depending on the service characteristic. And that is really the promise of 5G. You will have a slice for those really services that have real high requirements, and you will have a different slice for services that have very low requirements. But you need to make them affordable, and you need to make the business case sound, because otherwise this will become a huge investment for service providers who will never really have a chance of making the money, getting the money back for it.
So how will we be able to judge when this has been a commercial success?
Yeah, that's a good question too, right? I don't think we'll see it. There are still some people who think this could be another WiMAX adventure. We don't think so, but we also think in order to avoid that scenario, we really need to be able to take it step by step, not turn it into a vendor-driven exercise, but actually have user requirements drive it. So the creation of the industrial internet, what are the user requirements for that? What are the user requirements for tactile internet? What are the user requirements for things like autonomous driving cars? And when we have figured that one out, then we can start thinking about how do we realize it in a way that won't drive this into yet another commodity service for service providers, but actually make it possible for everybody in this wider ecosystem to make money and do it successfully.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing your view on that today, Carl, and talking to us.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you very much.